Cuba Broadcasting Director Carlos Garcia Perez will now give an overview of OCB activities. I would also like to say I've gotten a chance to know Carlos very well since I started. I've been down here a number of times in my day job, and Carlos is always gracious enough to have a cup of coffee or do whatever, Cuban coffee. And I've been quite impressed with the operation down here. I think a lot of good people doing a lot of really good work down here for Cuba, and excited to hear more about it today. So Carlos, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Sorry about the little phone issues, but this is actually what we deal with every day with Cuba, so I guess we're practicing a little bit, so we don't lose the issues that we face here. But I want to welcome the board. I want to welcome all our distinguished guests and visitors that are here today. It's a great honor and privilege to have you here. Very proud of this institution. So again, welcome. I want to emphasize that we don't like to call this a presentation, but more like a conversation. So we can talk, we can interrupt, ask questions in the middle of the conversation to make it more informal and informative to all of you. So here at the Martis, we frequently talk about two Cubas. And what follows are just examples of what we mean. And please remember, there are many more, so these are just a few. One Cuba is the one that commercial news operations try to cover, but there's only so much that they can do because of the restrictions to the freedom of press. So often, the coverage focuses on the Cuban government's leaders' actions or inactions. Because of the long history between the U.S. and Cuba, anything that may remotely affect U.S.-Cuba relations will grab headlines. You may also see a headline that reads, for example, the Cuban government repression has increased because there are X number of arrests last month. And then there's the other Cuba, still under the same dictatorship and repressive regime, but the headline might read as follows. The government repression has increased because more people are out on the street demanding respect for their most basic human rights, or because, like in the case of small business owners, they are demanding certain obligations from the government. You also see citizens on the island pushing the Cuban government and pushing hard for their political and economic independence. It was big news when the government allowed certain services to go private. Yet, there has been a black market in Cuba for decades. The other Cuba also shows a Cuban youth yearning for technology and using the technology to communicate and obtain information. And also, you see a very apolitical society with the human rights activists playing an important role, but the majority of the population not relating back to the human rights violations to their daily day struggles. So today's conversation will provide an understanding of the real Cuba through the work of the Martis. So to start the conversation, we're going to roll, or actually play a DVD to start the conversation going. So if we can roll the tape or play the DVD.
It's a new day in Cuba. And at the Martis.
Muy buenos días, momento de comenzar esta tu revista tempranito y de mañana, la portada informativa de Radio Martí.
Mándamelo de Human Trafficking.
Una entrevista de Karen con Santiseo, que le entregaron un teléfono clandestino.
Yo he visto la nota del aborto.
¿La viste ayer?
Sí.
Ah, bueno, pues nosotros vamos a trabajar eso hoy.
Karen entrevistó a San Esteban desde la calle y te vamos a tener un reportaje probablemente de la visita de los estudiantes cubanos, de los becarios que van a estar aquí durante todo el día.
Encontramos una entrevista con el embajador de Estados Unidos en Cuba entre el año 57 al 59 y el hombre explica cómo los Estados Unidos tuvieron un rol importantísimo a la hora de poner a Fidel Castro.
No hicimos una nota que está trabajando el
también muchos proyectos sobre el alcoholismo, sobre todo en la sociedad joven.
El hombre cubano, el único refugio para poder desaparecer de la faz de la tierra es el alcohol.
Es el alcohol.
Sí, pero la mujer entonces no se puede convertir.
Un tema sobre el 20 de mayo de la República, la Fundación de la República.
Vamos a comparar la sociedad cubana del 80 a la actualidad. Ha habido una creciente incidencia de robos en casas y en bodegas.
Por años se ha dicho que el capitalismo es malo. Realmente un capitalismo en Cuba va a ser brutal porque la gente no está preparada para ese cambio.
Plancha de pelo Babyliss, temperatura de 450 grados Fahrenheit. El mejor precio, los interesados pueden llamar al 5431-3763.
Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo están?
College students from Cuba have come to express their hopes for the future.
Vamos a enseñarle el mapa con todos los sitios de...
Where's the video from Cuba?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, on air.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Bienvenidos a Antena Live. Desde la cárcel en La Habana, en la que se encuentra confinado arbitrariamente, el escritor disidente cubano Ángel Santiesteban conversó en exclusiva con Televisión Martí.
He conocido la isla completa. He conocido muchas personas, desde jóvenes hasta niños, ancianos. Y es bueno cuando tú te vas a un pueblo que no conoces, encuentras a un joven y te das cuenta que este joven tiene un matiz contestatario. ¿Por qué me da?
Me da las cosas porque estoy fuera de tema, ¿tú ahí?
Radio Martí es la emisora que vengo oyendo desde que era chiquito, cuando había un radio en mi casa, ya están rotos, y era la emisora que me dio una idea de cuán realmente complejo, cuán realmente desagradable era la situación en mi país.
¿Qué enviaste?
Una nota sobre la cantidad de abortos que se han registrado en Cuba durante ese primer año y que ha sido la cifra más alta desde el año 1994, cuando la crisis de la tercera.
En solamente minutos ya vamos a estar conversando tanto con Michelle como con Giovanni Sánchez en La Habana.
Gracias por todo y dentro de 30 minutos te estamos llamando ya. Gracias.
I'm Lisandra Díaz Blanco.
No, I'm Lisandra Díaz Blanco. You are Juan Almeida.
We are the hosts of the radio show 1800 Online.
Our show is like a cyber cafe. We'll welcome to our studios to bloggers, artists, athletes, business persons, and anything to do with the internet.
We are fun, irreverent, but respectful. No, mierda, respectful.
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 No es como un Twitter o como un Facebook. Querés enviar a un grupo de personas un SMS. Lo envías a través de tu teléfono, pero con el costo de un CUC.
Acá arriba hay uno que dice Show My Screen.
Entonces, Limpio, estos son los duplicadores que utilizamos para sacar las copias que les enviamos a ustedes para La Habana, para que ustedes puedan distribuir todas las cantidades que necesitan.
Estos son los discos de la tele Martí.
DVDs and flash drives of Martí content are being distributed in Cuba.
¿Disco de qué?
De la TV Martí. Vamos tratando de llevarle la información a pueblo.
Y hoy en Contacto Cuba, amiga.
A las 4:30 de la tarde.
¿Qué tal, amigos? Pónganse cómodos y bienvenidos a su noticiero 100% deportivo, al duro y sin guantes. Y vamos a pedirle a Everett Semanat que nos ponga la musiquita de Put Me in Coach. Y recuerden que el deporte rompe todas las barreras.
Generating more content from Cuba, Latin America, and around the world for the people of Cuba, with the latest tools and technologies. Rewriting the traditional rules of broadcasting. We are Martí.
Somos Martí.
Oscar Rodriguez, and this is Natalia Pijedas. Before we begin, I just wanted to reiterate what Carlos said earlier. The culture we have here at OCB is about engagement. It's
It's about interaction, and it's about having a good conversation with the people in Cuba, but also in the building and with you today. So please, at any moment, feel free to interact with us, ask us questions. A second ago, you just saw the two Cubas. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the two Martis. There's a lot of myths out there about the Martis. You hear that TV Marti can't be seen, that Radio Marti can't be heard, and that there's a lot of fear, so people won't talk to us, so we don't have that engagement with our audience. So I want to let Natalia talk a little bit more about some of these points.
So let's start with the first one, the myths. And the first one is that no one watches TV Marti. And every time someone tells me, when I say that I work for the Martis, that no one watches TV Marti, and they talk to me about the plane of the blimp, because they still bring that up, I realize how little they know about our operation. And like any other media, we focus on where our audience is and how they consume media. And for that, I wanted to explain the three ways that people in Cuba consume media. One is for the local broadcast, which is the national television owned and operated entirely by the government. It's heavily politicized, very poor quality. And over the dozens of surveys that we have done, people are tired of this programming. They don't watch. The second way they watch television is through direct-to-home satellite cable systems. There are hundreds and hundreds of these pirate neighborhoods because they're forbidden on the island. And we air there every day. We're looking for more avenues and more channels, more hours of that. But this, again, is only available in urban cities and is cost prohibitive because you have to buy the programs and pay for them overseas. And the way that the majority of Cubans consume media nowadays is through channels of DVD and hard drives that we saw in the previous video how we're distributing the Marti content. And through that channel, we're sending thousands and thousands of DVDs each week, and we're crossing the whole island entirely. We have duplication centers, distribution centers, and the key part of this is that all the volunteers that help us distribute this content are not only political activists, volunteers, journalists, or bloggers, they're also regular members of the civil society in more than 100 churches of different denominations. So this is part of the hunger, the interest of making our content available across the island. And through this, the last way that we're distributing the content is also via FTP, since there's starting to be more access to the web and downloading. We want to make sure that our content is available the same day as it airs. So we have located 2 centers in Havana and Santiago where people can download our PrimeCam newscasts and other programming, and we're expanding that hopefully by at least 5 more centers by the end of the year. And through these different channels, we're not only sending TV Marti content, but also Radio Marti content. And that brings us to talk about our next myth, which is that Radio Marti is jammed.
Radio Marti is jammed. Can't hear it in Cuba. That is a common myth. I've been hearing that for 30 years. And it's true, the Cuban government goes through great efforts to jam our signal. The problem is, it's a big country, and there's a lot of people trying to listen to the station. So as you get outside of Havana, even in Havana, depending on where you're located, if you're hired in certain areas where the jammers are, as you get out into the rural areas, there's a lot of people listening. But how do you know that? This is just me saying this, right? Well, we've done a lot of work to engage our audience. Every day, we're getting SMS texts, emails. We're getting a lot of the new tools in work, in process now, where we're getting feedback from them on a daily basis. And that's how we know they're listening. Another vehicle we've used is contests. Just recently, we had a contest, it was last year, the World Series. It was just a couple days, not a very long contest at all. We had over 500 people that entered the contest. A lot of them did it through SMS texts and emails. And as you can see here, these emails that were coming to us, they're not coming to us from Yahoo or Gmail. They're coming to us from government accounts at the Ministry of Education, Health. And so people are using these accounts to talk to us. But that brings up the next point, which is the NBA. This is the most recent example. We broadcast the NBA just last week, the finals. And we did a great job doing that. But the Cuban government apparently was concerned. They turned around and rebroadcast, pirated the NBA finals. This is a picture from Cuba of the NBA finals being broadcast. They actually went on their national website and put it in the programming. The NBA wasn't too happy about it. But there are other examples of that. We put a lot of information out, in this case sports. and the people in Cuba are listening to that information. They're writing down the statistics. This is an example of an email blast on the intranet inside of Cuba that's going out to the people on the island. This was so popular that the Cuban government, within about 2 weeks, put out a new sports program, something they hadn't done in about 10 years. So they're listening. They're watching to see what we're doing. It's not just sports, though. It's a lot of other things and a lot of people taking risks to participate in our program. They're going to great lengths. We're going to listen to a clip now from Rafael Samuel. This gentleman went all the way to the point of listening to Radio Martí while he was in jail. He was able to smuggle a radio. Let's listen to that.
Gracias a un compañero en la cárcel de Guanajay que se inventó una radio de galera, pude escuchar las primeras emisiones de Radio Martí desde la prisión, desde la cárcel. Por primera vez los que no teníamos voz, alcanzamos o llegamos a tener una voz amplificada hacia toda la República. Viva Radio Martí.
More recently, with the new travel that's going on through the visas, Joanny Sanchez was able to travel for the first time under that program. She came to OCB. She told us the importance of our transmissions. And let's listen to that.
Debo decir que son muy escuchados en Cuba, sobre todo en los pequeños pueblos, en provincia. Sí, hablo con muchos activistas, con muchas personas de pueblo, de provincia, de pequeñas locaciones, de pequeños caseríos prácticamente perdidos en la nada, para los que ustedes son la única fuente de información paralela a la información gubernamental. Así que se los agradezco en nombre de ellos. No para nada vuestra boca en el vacío, para nada.
All of these examples you're seeing here lead us to the third myth. People are afraid to talk, so we're not getting the engagement. People are losing that fear more and more. Example, just at the beginning of this school year in Cuba, we had a program talking about how the school was going to start, and teachers from the island started calling in. They were concerned about supplies for their students. And so they started calling in. There was a bit of a a network that was created there live on the show of people talking about, their concerns and how to help each other get supplies. Another example was what you call a city council member in an area in Cuba where she was so frustrated with the system in trying to be concerned with the closures that were taking place in rural schools in Cuba. She wasn't getting any results, so she turned to Las Noticias Como Son, the radio program here, called in, and that ended up getting results. So those are a couple of examples, but again, all the other examples are the SMS, Piramideo, all of these other new media tools that we're using to get through.
And part of the point that we wanted to make here is that people come to us because we break the stories that the Cuban government won't cover. We tell the stories that are not available otherwise. And at the end of the day, we produce content that puts the Cuban government in a position to defend themselves. And here's an example. When the cholera outbreak started last year, we started reporting on it and providing information on how to prevent the illness a month before the Cuban government even acknowledged there was a problem. Same thing happened with the dengue, which eventually became one of the most complicated epidemics in Cienfuegos. And just recently with this virus that is so hard for me to pronounce, the chikungunya virus in the Caribbean, that has infected more than 300,000 people and already killed 28 people in the Caribbean. We've been reporting on that for almost 2 months, and the Cuban government only this week recognized that there was a problem and recognized of 6 cases. So we are recognized of 6 cases. So we are telling these stories, they're listening, and they're responding. There was this example in Radio Martí program, Cuba al Día, that reported through independent journalists that there were cases of smuggling of endangered domestic birds. And it was not until that the next day, Grandma, the national newspaper, reported on it. Similar thing happened with a report that we did about the impunity in which there was a massive killing of sea turtles. Next day, the regional newspaper, Sierra Maestra, published this article about the praises that the World Wildlife Fund was giving the Cuban government for their treatment of the turtles. However, the Martís were able to secure this video that runs for about 5 minutes, just showing the shells of the turtles in the area. So the point is, as you can see, a trend, right? We reported it, we make we discover the uncomfortable stories. Cuban government has to acknowledge and respond to it. And that is a constant, that doesn't change.
You know, these examples, you may not always see the footstep, but we frequently see the footprint left behind. So these are examples of that. However, can you roll the video, Natalia? The oppression is an everyday thing here. People trying to get out and get the word out are getting beat up, and there's so many examples of this happening. The Cuban government controls all the media. They control all of the intranet inside the island, and they make sure that alternative sources of news and information don't reach the people. So that is the main purpose of you seeing that. It's the most isolated country in the Western Hemisphere.
And one way that they keep this isolation, not only by owning the means of communication, is by limiting and making it really cost restrictive. So we've seen an increase of usage of cell phones exponentially. Now we have more than 2 million users of cell phones in Cuba, more than landlines. However, the cost of the cell phone technology is outside of the capacity of regular Cubans. To give you an example, just to send 1 megabyte, like simple picture from your cell phone, it will cost you the equivalent of $1 when you make around the regular Cuban will make $20 a month. The other way to control this is through the access to the internet. As you know, it's restrictive, it's censored. 5% of the population in Cuba has access to it. But again, it's also very expensive. Accessing your email, you have to pay $2.50. To navigate the internet, which is not internet, it's intranet controlled by the government, it's $4.50 an hour. And it's really above the means of the regular Cuban people. However, Cubans are very creative. And we've seen a huge increase and proliferation of Wi-Fi networks, illegal antennas, and they access the web. And we've been putting a lot of efforts in revamping our web content and producing original content that is starting to show good progress. In the last 3 years, we've seen our daily unique visitors grow more than 480%. The 5 first months of this month, if we continue the trend, we're going to, again, be breaking the traffic to our site with this original content. And of course, because our site recovers all the stories that we cover on TV and radio and the original content for the website, the Cuban government blocks it, so we provide proxy sites that circumvent these blockages so people can go online. And this is an example of a student in Cuba watching our stories.
Is that traffic coming from outside the Cuba or inside the Cuba?
It's a mix. So through the proxy sites, we can know how many people logged in Cuba for the ones that we host. There are many others that we don't host that people can access to, and I cannot give accurate data, but the ones that we host, we can. And through the web is not the only way that we connect. We also connect with them via targeted cell phones and emails that we send at least for 1 million a month. And this is the important part of it is that it's not only that we're pushing content, but it's a two-way communication, particularly with the SMS.
Given all the limitations that you've just seen, SMS texting is very popular. We've received over 3,000 SMS texts since 2012 from Cuba. Most of that information we've been able to use inside of news and information programming on the station. But it's not just the news and information, it's also what we're doing to empower the people on the island. Piramideo is a tool, is a social media tool that was created in order for them to be able to converse, to share information, and to provide each other with new sources of whatever they wanted to use it for. Recently, the people are losing the fear. So when you saw the recent news on Sunsuneo, you know, that caused a jump in the subscribers to Piramideo to what is now almost 12,000 users.
So we're looking into these new technologies and finding new ways to deliver our content, like paper flash drives that are easy to smuggle, hard to detect. And if people are connected to the website or have access to online, we can also track their activities. And same thing happens with social media. We revamped our efforts in social media. We're brought from 1% to 18% of traffic now comes from social media. Facebook, extremely popular on the island. And we've seen such a popularity of it that we decided to launch this project called Reporta Cuba, We started with probably 30 citizen journalists across the island. We launched this 1 month ago. Now we have more than 60 citizen journalists that they send us pictures, video, everything via SMS, email, and all the means of communication. And this is one of the efforts that we're trying to do to build up from the very basic technical capacities available on the island mixed with the new technology that we can provide. We're looking into, besides the Marti app that we currently have, developing apps with teams of coders that are based in Havana that could bring useful tools on an everyday basis. And basically this is trying to bring the analog and digital world together because that's how it functions on the island.
Let's step back a second and look at how the transition is starting to take place between traditional broadcast vehicles and the new media. Radiogram.
That it is. I'm sorry, I jumped it.
Radiogram is a tool we're starting to use now. This is a signal that is sent out over shortwave. It's a digital signal that, when received on a computer, turns into text, and that is how we're going to get the newscasts into the island, which they can then share through Bluetooth or simply print them out and share them that way. So that's in progress now. But also, we're looking at developing a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week satellite network for Cuba, radio, using some of the radio digital satellite transmission possibilities that we have there. And we're also actively pursuing broadening the internet access on the island.
Well, all of these new technologies are fantastic, but if we don't have serious content that we are conceiving originally to work across our platforms, and we wouldn't have anything. So to talk about content and how we choose this content, explain to you a little bit more about the process of selecting the stories that we cover, we're going to call Humberto Castillo to give you a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Natalia.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, before this meeting, we decided that I would talk to you in Spanish because it's a way to show you how diverse and multicultural we are in the Martis. But the real reason behind this is that I don't want to provoke brain damage in any one of you. Entonces, realmente yo quiero que darle un poquito de perspectiva histórica a esto esta presentación que les quedó muy bien a Natalia y a Oscar, de cómo se hacen los Martí, cómo transmitimos nuestra información. Hay que pensar, vamos a partir de un punto histórico y concreto, con cifras, que se trata de que la Cuba en 1959, antes de Castro, contaba con 26 periódicos, más de 80 estaciones de radio y 3 canales de televisión privados. En menos de 2 años eso formó parte de la historia. Por tanto, la creación de Radio Martí en 1985, en plena Guerra Fría, significó un cambio radical para la sociedad atrapada en Cuba, la sociedad censurada, desinformada, de que el gobierno controlaba los únicos medios supervivientes de comunicación. En 1965 la cosa se convierte en algo más férreo y más absolutamente controlado con la fundación del diario Granma, que es el órgano oficial del Partido Comunista de Cuba, y que se convirtió desde ese momento en el rector de lo que se informaba al pueblo cubano. Por tanto, Cuba en 1965 ya era un verdadero sepulcro de la libertad de expresión. Al nacimiento de Radio Martí se abren las puertas de la información para los cubanos, con sus dificultades, con sus limitaciones de poder sintonizar o no la emisora, pero nos convertimos, como dijo Saumel desde la cárcel, en la voz de los que no tenían voz y en la información en general de lo que sucedía en el mundo y de lo que sucedía dentro de la isla. Ejemplo de ello, a grosso modo puedo mencionar que Radio Martí fue por donde primero se le dijo al pueblo cubano cuando se libraba la guerra africana en Angola. Radio Martí reportaba las víctimas que tenía el ejército cubano, las bajas que tenía el ejército cubano, las posiciones técnicas, todo lo que la prensa oficial dejaba de decir. También en esa misma época surge desafortunadamente la plaga mundial del virus del SIDA. En Cuba, como en todas partes del mundo, hubo SIDA también, pero no se sabía dentro de la isla y no se sabía en el mundo. Radio Martí reveló con unos reportajes muy completos la existencia del virus en la isla, la segregación que sufrían los pacientes, las personas infectadas con el virus en un sanatorio llamado Los Cocos, que fue un escándalo mundialmente que estas personas vivieran como presos por padecer la enfermedad y además enterarse a los cubanos de que se podían contagiar con esta enfermedad. Igualmente también ha sido plataforma Radio Martí de información cada vez que ha habido una deserción, no solo de figuras importantes del gobierno, pero también deportistas, ciudadanos comunes, artistas, y entonces nosotros fuimos el vehículo para que ellos se enteraran. Y con muchísimo orgullo puedo decir esto hoy porque yo vengo del mundo corporativo. Antes de trabajar aquí trabajé en periódicos del área comercial, específicamente en el Nuevo Herald, periódico que dirigí durante 10 años, y fui fiscalizador de esta casa. Fiscalizador en el sentido de cómo se usaban los dineros públicos, de cómo se usaban los dineros de los ciudadanos, de cómo se informaba al pueblo cubano, qué tipo de periodismo se hacía aquí. Y formar parte de esta casa hoy, lo digo con emoción, me llena de orgullo por el periodismo de excelencia que siempre se hizo, por el periodismo de excelencia que se hace hoy, y más que todo, por la responsabilidad que tenemos hoy en día, que por primera vez en los últimos 2 años tenemos periodistas en Cuba, periodistas que funcionan y cobran, y le pagamos gracias a una especial licencia de OFAC, le pagamos y contratamos periodistas dentro de la isla y transmitimos estos valores de excelencia periodística. Ellos tenían su formación, pero nosotros lo llevamos al periodismo que se hace en el mundo, al periodismo que se hace en los Estados Unidos, al periodismo balanceado, al periodismo de doble fuente. En esta casa hemos introducido como una meta que ya es absolutamente común. Cuando nosotros hacemos un reportaje, buscamos la respuesta del gobierno cubano. Si vamos a hablar de las enfermedades, llamamos a los hospitales. Si vamos a hablar de la educación, nos comunicamos con el Ministerio de Educación, con escuelas, con maestros, no disidentes, con la oficialidad. Hacemos un trabajo de periodismo dentro de la isla exactamente igual y con los mismos estándares que los hacemos en los Estados Unidos. Y hay que pensar que esos colegas que trabajan allá, esos colegas trabajan en un ambiente absolutamente hostil, en un ambiente donde peligra no solo su vida por ejercer la profesión, sufren el decomiso de sus instrumentos de trabajo, le quitan las cámaras, le quitan los teléfonos. Conseguir un teléfono celular en Cuba no es fácil, muchísimo menos una cámara, muchísimo menos un ordenador donde editar los materiales. Estos periodistas producen para nosotros materiales multimedia. Los hemos formado de esa manera, algunos ya tenían algunos recursos, le damos entrenamiento a través de las agencias que nos ayudan con la contratación de ellos para no pagarles directamente y digan que son periodistas pagados por el imperio, por el enemigo. Pues buscamos intermediarios, agencias que les paguen y les den entrenamiento. Igualmente, nuestro Buró Central de Información se comunica directamente con ellos, les hace las asignaciones y, por supuesto, la orientación de cómo debes trabajarse los materiales de información para que sean verdaderamente creíbles y sean válidos y sean respetuosos y puedan desbaratar esa campaña nacional e internacional que ha hecho el gobierno de Cuba de desacreditar el trabajo de los Martí, de mellar nuestra credibilidad. Esas campañas se han hecho en foros, lógicamente, nacionales. Todos los líderes cubanos critican, líderes políticos critican nuestro trabajo, pero también lo hacen en foros internacionales como las Naciones Unidas, como los países no alineados, como otras organizaciones latinoamericanas, particularmente en el hemisferio occidental, trabajan mucho contra nosotros. Pero con este trabajo verdaderamente de periodismo de excelencia es muy difícil que esa campaña de la gran llamada batalla de ideas que han hecho en los últimos años a través de la internet, a través de las redes sociales, de desacreditar nuestro trabajo, realmente podemos probar lo contrario y ustedes lo han visto ahí. Hoy los Martí cuentan con una red de periodistas dentro de la isla que realmente es impactante. Son periodistas, más de 2 docenas de periodistas que, como digo, trabajan y se les paga. Es decir, son empleados de los Martí, son nuestros stringers dentro de la isla. Y estos periodistas abarcan todos los temas de la sociedad. Trabajamos los temas políticos con disidentes, con opositores que demuestran sus proyectos de trabajo. No nos interesa la politiquería, no nos interesa combatir al gobierno, nos interesa informar al pueblo específicamente de qué se hace, cómo se piensa dentro de la isla, ciertos sectores, y les proveemos esa información. Igualmente trabajamos en los renglones de la economía. Tanto la gubernamental, seguimos, fiscalizamos qué hace el gobierno, qué progresa, qué distribuye, qué no distribuye, y reforzamos mucho la cobertura de la naciente iniciativa privada dentro de la isla. Tenemos un programa, por ejemplo, que se hace periódicamente, que es Avanza Cuba. Ese Avanza Cuba, ¿qué quiere decir? ¿De qué se trata ese programa? Es qué puedes hacer tú cubano, dentro de la isla, al margen de lo que el gobierno te permita o no. ¿Qué puedes hacer por ti, por progresar, por ganar espacio, por mejorar tu vida? Ese es nuestro trabajo. De eso consisten los Martí hoy en día. Realmente creo que es importante que diga también que estos periodistas producen periódicamente una cantidad de material, generan contenido tan abundante que es bastante difícil incluso el poder, a pesar del flujo de comunicación que tenemos con ellos a través de llamadas telefónicas continuas todos los días, muchas llamadas, textos, mensajes de textos telefónicos que funcionan muy bien, y las redes sociales que permiten la inmediatez de la comunicación, pero generan tanto contenido. Ahora tenemos un proyecto de producción radial dentro de la isla, que eso está off the record todavía, por favor, pero lo estamos haciendo, ya estamos generando bastante contenido, y en algún momento, las ondas de Radio Martí sonarán dentro y se emitirán desde dentro de la isla. Definitivamente, con este paquete que ustedes vieron antes presentado por Oscar y Natalia, y cómo nosotros recogemos la información, no hay duda de que el trabajo de los Martí es esencial, fundamental, necesario, útil para la naciente sociedad civil en Cuba. Y, por supuesto, tenemos impacto, pero del impacto siempre habla el jefe. Carlos García. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.